Good morning. I hope your weekend was okay. Today we are going to be doing a new lesson on writing percent expressions. Remember, an expression just has numbers and variables. So I would like you to, as always, complete the do now, watch this screencast. It's very important you watch the screencast, as later this week we'll be starting a new chapter with all new material. Then I would like you to complete the quizzes.com. The target score for a Check Plus Plus is 27 out of 30 correct. Remember, you also get 3 redemption questions. If you are struggling, put it off to the side and join the Zoom at 11:30 a.m. and I will answer your questions. These notes could also be found in Google Classroom. The big idea is that an increase of 15% is the same as multiplying by 115%, and a decrease in 20% is the same as multiplying by 80%. We have to remember we always start with 100%, okay? So a guitar is on sale for 20% off the original price. Let P represent the original price. What expressions can be used to calculate the sale price? So if we start with our 100% and we are saving 20, we know we are actually paying 80% of the original, or 80% of P. Now we need to make it a decimal to write the expression. So remember, you move your decimal point 2 places to the left, and the first expression that you can write is 8/10 P. If you are saving 20%, you are actually paying 80% of the original. Another way to write this is if we start with P as the whole, we are also subtracting 20% of the original. So P minus 2/10 P would also give you the expression for the sale price of the guitar. So take a minute, this one exactly the same. Jack bought a bike that was 35% off the original price. Let P represent the original price. What expressions can be used to calculate the sale price? So if he starts with 100%, which is the whole, and he is saving 35%, you need to start by doing 100 minus 35 and realize he is paying 65% of the original. So the first expression is very straightforward. He is paying 65% or 65 hundredths of the original. The next expression we could write the same way as we did the last example. Well, if we start with the original price, or P, he is saving 35% of the original price. That is another expression that would be used to calculate the sale price of the bike. The past 2 examples we did with discount. This one is a little different. A board game costs $D. The sales tax rate is 8%. Write 2 expressions that can be used to calculate the total cost for the game, including tax. Remember, tax is an add-on. So if we have to pay for the board game, which is 100%, and tax we are adding 8%, we know we can pay 108% of the cost. So when we make the 108% a decimal, we know to calculate the cost of the board game, we can do 1 800th D. The other way we can figure out the cost of the board game is if we calculate the original cost and then we add our sales tax, because sales tax is an add-on, 800th D, we would get the final cost of the board game, including tax. So take a minute and try this on your own. It's very similar to what we just did. What expressions can be used to calculate the total price of a DVD that costs $D if the tax rate is 7.5%? Hopefully, you realize that if the DVD is 100% and the tax is 7.5%, we could find the total price by doing 107.5%. The other way to write it would be very similar to like the last example. We have the cost of the DVD, which is D, plus our sales tax, which is 7.5% of the DVD. So those are the 2 expressions that can be written to find the total cost of the DVD. So you have to remember, tip is also an add-on. So Rebecca is going to leave a 20% tip for her meal. If C represents the cost of her dinner, we need to write 2 expressions that can be used to calculate the cost of the dinner, including tip. So the first, if the dinner's 100% and she is tipping 20%, we know she is paying 120% of the cost. So we make that a decimal and we realize 1 2/10 could be calculating the total cost of the dinner including tip. Another way we could do it is we have the cost of the dinner plus 20% of the cost, and that would give you the total cost including tip. You could also write this using the distributive property. If you know 1 is the meal and then you know 2/10, you could say the quantity of 1 plus 2/10 times the cost of the meal would equal the cost including tip. So the next example is Tamara has money in a savings account which earns 3% interest each month. We need to write 2 expressions that can be used to calculate the amount of money in her account after 1 month. Let A represent the amount of money in her account. So she is earning 3% each month. So we start with her full account, which is 100%, and she is earning 3%. So each month she will have 103% of her original. So that is one way to write it. The other way to write it is we start with her account balance and she's earning 3%. So it's A plus 3/100ths A. So for this example, we are going to write an expression that includes tip and tax. Ella buys a meal for $M. Ella needs to pay 7% sales tax on her meal and leave an 18% tip on her meal. We need to write 2 expressions that can be used to calculate the total cost for the meal, including tip and tax. So in this case, the meal is M. Remember, she also pays 7% of the meal for tax, and 18% is off the original meal, not the taxed amount. So if you look at the meal as 100% plus 7% plus 18%, we could say the first expression, she paid 125% of her meal. You can always add the tip and the tax together. Another expression you could write is simply the cost of her meal plus 7% of the meal plus 18% of the meal, and that will give you her total cost. There are other various combinations that will equal this. Just keep in mind tax and tip are off the original cost of the meal. The last example I want to do with you involves markup. Hobby Lobby buys crafts for $C. They mark the price up 120% to find the selling cost. Which expression represent this relationship? So we need to write the expressions for this relationship. We know the crafts start with $C or 100%. They are marking the crafts up 120%. So you, as the consumer, are paying 220% of the original. When you make this a decimal, you realize it's 2 2/10% of the original cost. Markup is an add-on, so 220% is 2 2/10 when you make it a decimal. The other thing you have to remember is you can start with the cost, which is C, and then you can mark it up 1 1/10 of the cost, and that will give you the total. Remember, there is always a 1 in front of the C. It's there, but you just can't see it. So when you combine your like terms, that is where you would get 2 1/10 C. So I just want to review analyzing these expressions. If you see the expression 7/10 X, that means you paid 70% of the original. So that would mean if the original was 100%, you had a decrease of 30%. That expression could be used for a sale, a coupon, and so on. If you look at the next expression, 1 1/10, remember when we make it a percent, that means it's 110% of the original. So this is increasing the original by 10%. This could be simply a 10% markup. It could be a tax rate of 10%, and so on. The next one is 4/10 X. That means you are paying 40% of the original. So this would mean if you pay 40% of the original, you are saving 60%. And the last example is 2 1/10. So when you move the decimal 2 places to the right, you realize it's 210% of the original. So if the original is 100%, this is an increase of 110%. 110 because you have to take off the initial 100. Okay, so 210% would be, for example, a markup. Okay, anything that increases would be a percent over 100. So you have to remember 100% is the original or the X. Okay, 100% is your variable. If it's below 100%, it's a discount or a decrease. If it's above 100%, it's a markup or an increase. Okay, if you have any questions, please remember I will be on Zoom at 11:30 a.m. as well as 10 a.m. You can also email me. Okay, please try and review these notes as well as the examples. Also, when you go to complete your quizzes, there are other ways to write the expression, so make sure you are checking for every way that is equivalent, including combining like terms.